Yes, that's great. So I'm Swiss. I'm originally from Switzerland, and I'm learning Arabic, but not to the extent of being able to do an entire presentation in Arabic. So it will be in English for me tonight. And I will start sharing my screen. If it's okay with you, I have a presentation on the topic.
Yeah, sure, go on.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, welcome to this lecture on climate adaptation strategies. Again, my name is Margot Plassard from Switzerland, and I work currently as environmental analyst at UNDP, so the United Nations Development Program at the country office in Egypt, Cairo. I have a background of environmental engineering and science, and I'm working in the environment team and the biodiversity team here at UNDP Egypt. So what I propose for today, the agenda, is to go first through the definition of what is climate adaptation and what are the strategies. Then why do we need to adapt, the challenges related to it. Then a quick reminder on the differences between climate adaptation and mitigation, because those are two words that are very frequently used in my work, and I think it's important to really know the difference between them. Then a bit about our work as UNDP, the key areas of adaptation. Then I'm gonna present what are NAPs. You may already be familiar with it, but it's very important, so I'm gonna go through it again. So it's National Adaptation Plans. Then I'm gonna give you a few examples of climate adaptation projects in the Arab region in 3 different countries. Then what I think is the future of climate adaptation, conclusion, and then we'll finish with a Q&A. Don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions, but we will have this dedicated Q&A session at the end also. So about the definition of climate adaptation. So what is adaptation? Adaptation means what concretely can you do, both ecologically, socially, or economically, to respond to climate change. So concretely, it's what actions can you take to respond to current and future climate change impacts. Why do we need to adapt? Why is it important and why now? So as we know, the Earth is already warmer than it was at pre-industrial levels. And by the end of this century, we know that we will reach a certain degree, which is 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius, that is above the safety established by scientists. What does that mean, safety? It means that those impacts will be impacted by the effect of climate change. And those impacts through time, in the upcoming years, in the upcoming decades, they will become more frequent and more intense. Why do we need to act now? It's because in the future, adaptation is going to become harder because the impacts are going to be, as I said, more frequent and more intense. So it's going to be harder and more expensive to start doing something. That's why we need to start now. And of course, some effects of climate change are already felt in some countries that are more vulnerable. What does it mean to be more vulnerable? It means that you will feel the impact stronger than in other places. Then a bit about the challenges to climate adaptation. So the first challenge is a financial challenge, actually. So it's that we are struggling to access finance for those kind of projects. We estimate that the needs for climate change adaptation projects are 10 to 18 times larger than what is currently available. A second challenge is the fact that we don't necessarily have all the information that we need. In order to take actions, we need to know what is the situation, so we need to have strong data. In some places, climate data are available, but in some others, it's not available or it's not shared because the tools are not here or because there is no collaboration between stakeholders, for example. If we don't have data, we can't do risk assessments. And this is really needed because once we know where are the risks, we can prioritize where the actions will be. And also in some places, there are weak systems for monitoring. So again, it's hard to take any actions. Finally, the third main challenge, I would say, is related to institutional and governance constraint. So as I previously a bit mentioned, sometimes there is no coordination within the same sectors, but also among sectors that should collaborate together. And also there is sometimes lack of knowledge between people that are making decisions, but also technical knowledge of people that should work on the ground, and also lack of experience. Now to come back to what is the difference between climate adaptation and mitigation, because it's two actions or it's two actions that we may do related to climate change, but what concretely is the difference? Mitigation was the first action that was identified by scientists linked with climate change. So mitigation is the fact of reducing the extent of climate change, meaning reducing the emissions of greenhouse gases that are causing then the impact of climate change. How to reduce those emissions? There are two ways, either by reducing it at the source or by creating sinks in which emissions and greenhouse gases will be trapped. So we'll lower the concentration in the atmosphere. Whereas adaptation is different, is you have the impact of climate change, but now how can you prevent or minimize the damages? Because those effects of climate change will impact people, will impact ecosystems. And how do you deal with them? What actions can you do now that there are those impacts in order to minimize the damages? Now a bit about UNDP climate adaptation work. So as UNDP, we're the largest organization that work for climate change adaptation in the UN system. So what does that mean? We work in more than 100 countries, including 45 least developed countries and 10 small island developing countries. Those categories of countries are the ones that we think are very vulnerable. Those countries, but within those countries, there are also vulnerable groups of population. And so we have a particular focus on those groups that are poor people, women, and indigenous people. Those people or those groups of people are more vulnerable to climate change, and they are at greater risk. That's why we are focusing on them. So when you want to do any actions on climate adaptation, you can target one or multiple of those key areas. As UNDP, we identified 10 key areas that I want to go through with you right now. The first one is to work on adaptation policy and planning. So this is more at a legislative or regulatory level by adding adaptation into your policies and into your global or national plannings. We'll go through this. Yeah. I'll go through this again when I speak about national adaptation plans, NAPs. Then we can work and target livelihoods, because sometimes climate change has impact on livelihood of people and of vulnerable groups. So sometimes we need to work on it to, for example, diversify their income, to protect their livelihood. Oops. Then the third one is about ecosystem-based adaptation. This is linked with nature-based solutions. That's a concept that you might have heard already. And it is how to work with nature or how to mimic nature, because in the nature and in ecosystems, you have already a lot of solutions. Nature is very intelligent. Can I ask you maybe for the people to mute themselves? Thank you so much. And so it's working with nature, both for nature, but also for people, by mimicking nature and by either enhancing ecosystem, protecting them, many different ways, but it's working with nature. The fourth aspect is on food security, because again, climate change might have impact on food security, and so it's how to protect it. The fifth one is on water resource management and access to water, because as maybe my colleague Tarnim Ashush yesterday explained to you about climate change impact, it can also impact water resources and also, for example, rainfall patterns or droughts. So this is a very important topic. Then we can also work on climate information and early warning systems. This is very important, and it's at the basis of many, many different actions, because as I told you a bit previously, we need to have data, climate data, in order to be able to make strategies and to take actions that will be meaningful and impactful. So we need to enhance, in most of the cases, climate information systems in order to gather more data, to then take meaningful actions and decisions. Early warning system is also important, and it's linked with climate hazards, for example, droughts, storms. It's how, when you have the information that it will come, those kind of hazards will come, how to transfer this information to people that will be impacted, for them better to protect themselves, protect their family, protect their houses, protect their income, also, for example, their crops. Urban climate resilience is working within cities, because we can also feel the impact of climate change in city. So it's, for example, how to build differently, how to construct roads, how to plant trees, for example, to reduce heat waves within the cities. Climate resilient infrastructure is how to build differently. Again, with heat wave, we know that architecture can be changed, or design of infrastructure can be changed in order to better withstand the effect of climate change. Another aspect is on coastal adaptation. So we know that coastal zones and coastlines are at risk. I'm going to show you afterwards a project linked with coastal adaptation, but they're at risk, and it's how to protect them. And finally, on climate change and health, because we do know that climate change also has potential impact on health, linked with air pollution, linked with heat waves, and many other types of diseases. So it's how to act on this specific topic. Adaptation needs to be integrated in some sort of strategic planning, and we create national adaptation plans for this. So I'm going to show you a quick video on it, and I'm going to ask you a question afterward on it. So be aware.
The climate crisis is already affecting communities, economies, and ecosystems, making it harder to plan our futures. Our decisions must consider the impacts of climate change, such as rising temperatures, shifting seasons, and extreme weather, like floods and droughts. Alongside urgently cutting greenhouse gas emissions, adapting to the impacts of climate change is an urgent imperative for protecting communities, ecosystems, and economies. But how do countries shift from short-term adaptation projects to a more strategic, longer-term approach responding to climate change? And how do we make climate risk a regular part of how we plan our futures? The National Adaptation Plan process is about putting climate change adaptation at the heart of decision-making. Led by national governments with the support of non-governmental actors, it is a strategic process for countries to identify and address their medium and long-term priorities for building resilience to climate change. Through the NAP process, countries assess climate impact, risks, and vulnerabilities to decide where adaptation efforts should be targeted, identify and prioritize adaptation actions, implement these actions, and track progress and learn how to improve adaptation action to make it more effective and inclusive. Importantly, the NAP process puts in place the systems, skills, and knowledge that are needed to make adaptation part of decision-making and budgeting. Adaptation will only be effective if it is equitable, and it puts people in situations of vulnerability at the center of efforts to manage climate risks. Inclusive, participatory NAP processes can address social and gender inequalities and will lead to a more effective adaptation. The NAP process was established in 2010 under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Today, almost all countries have a NAP process underway. As part of the NAP process, more and more countries are developing a National Adaptation Plan document that articulates their national priorities for adapting. Many countries that have contributed the least to climate change are amongst the most vulnerable to its impacts. These developed countries and small island developing states are amongst the most in need of support for planning and implementing climate change adaptation. Communities and countries around the world are already adapting. The NAP process helps scale up action, track progress, and channel resources to the people and places that need them the most. Through effective, inclusive adaptation planning, we can build a climate resilient future together.
So my question to you right now, if we can maybe leave the floor to other participants, is if you can tell me, based on what you've seen, what are those national adaptation plans, and if you can identify a few of their characteristics. Maybe you can unmute yourself if you have an answer. Yes, please.
It's like,
Hadir?
Yeah, is it me?
it's like Egypt vision for 2030.
Sorry, I could not hear you well.
It's like Egypt vision 2030.
That's also a strategic plan until 2030. So that's good. You're identifying something that is one of the characteristic of those national adaptation plans that it's willing to have a medium to long-term vision. That's very good. Anyone has another answer?
I guess it's my turn.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. So I think first they aim to help countries like identify medium and long-term adaptation needs and develop strategies to reduce vulnerability. I'm not mistaken, right? to climate change, I mean.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I guess what was mentioned in the video, it's assess vulnerabilities, set priorities, like to determine adaptation actions and most urgent and feasible solutions for what's happening, like in some places that are very vulnerable, and integrate adaptation also to ensure climate adaptation is embedded into national development planning.
Yeah, that's great. You're seeing a lot of its characteristic right now, which is great. So it's really to assess the vulnerability and the risk, first having an assessment phase, to then further be able to implement it within its strategy. So it's great what you just said. Thank you so much.
They also identified financial things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shuruk?
Yes, let me just mention some of the characteristics as I have still remember. This plan must be developed and lead by, let's say, internal communities, national government internally. And it must be involved all stakeholders, including government agencies, civil societies, private sector, from the internal country.
I think you just muted yourself, but it was great what you were saying.
No, I am not the one who was muted. One of the hosts. The plan must involve many stakeholders, including government, private sector, NGOs, international NGOs, and it must cover many fields, including, let's say, water, agriculture, shelter. It is based on scientific evidence, including scientific data for vulnerable assessment, market assessment, need analysis. And it focus also, as I still remember, about the gender sensitive and equality and equity. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So you pinpointed something else that is very important, is that those national adaptation plan are country specific. So they must be, as you said, drafted for the context of the country, with its own risk, with its own background. So definitely. And you mentioned also the fact that a lot of different stakeholders have to collaborate in order to draft it, and that's very great. And it, of course, involve also scientists and scientific reports. That's great. Thank you. I don't know who's next. Maybe anyone can unmute themselves.
Muhammad Nasr, he is in the order.
Okay, sorry. So, Mohammed?
horeeya ma garanaysaa iyagii hala fadhiistay
So maybe Mohammed Nasser, you can, or we go through the next participant, maybe Enes Hatoum.
Yeah, so the characteristics of NAP, as far as I remember, are country-driven, which means led and owned by the national government, reflecting national priorities. They are long-term and strategic, meaning that they focus on medium to long-term adaptation goals, like unlike the short-term projects. They are flexible, which means that they are continuously updated based on new data and experiences. And like you mentioned, it's cross-sectoral, which means that more than one sector, they work together to develop the plans. And they are participatory and inclusive, like mentioned, engages government, civil society, private sector, and vulnerable groups. They are evidence-based, meaning that they are informed by scientific data, risk and vulnerability assessments. They are based on capacity building orientation, which means they strengthen institutional and technical abilities for adaptation. And they are certainly aligned with development and DRR, which means that they support national development goals and disaster risk reduction, and surely financially suitable. Like mentioned, they are suitable for each country, for whether they are developed, developing, underdeveloped countries. And finally, transparent and monitored. Like mentioned, they involve like many stakeholders, so which means monitoring, evaluation, and reporting progress are being held.
That's great. Thank you so much. You know already a lot. And thank you for raising all those very important points. Thank you so much. Maybe Sarbast Omar. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Yeah, Sabas. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all. As you know, climate change, it is the universal issue. Therefore, in each country has a national adaptation plans. In overall, the aim of national adaptation related to climate change, how to deal, how to adaptate, how to mitigate. This plan from a country which surrounding by water a little bit different from a country who has a desert, who has not has a huge or too much forests. This plan from Brazil different from my country in Iraq, but the aim is to care about climate change. In each plan, each country has national adaptation must be involve all parties of a country. For example, farmers, stakeholders, factories, customers as well. All part of in a country needs to be aware about the climate change, how to deal, how to adaptate, how to mitigate. It is my opinion or my understanding about national adaptation plans for each country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. As you said, it's so different from a country to another, right? So it really needs to be country driven and also have this aspect of collaboration and multi-stakeholder. That's great. Thank you so much. Maybe we finish with Yusuf Saad, or oh, sorry, Mohammed, I told you before, but you were not replying.
Sorry, my mic
Oh,
was
sorry.
in. There is an error in my mic.
Mm,
Okay. You can hear me well?
perfect. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. In my opinion, national adaptation plans are very important because they help countries prepare for climate change impacts, and they guide how to protect people and nature and the economy from floods, drought, or other disaster. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, as you say, it's so important. Actually, it's for me also the most important tool when it comes to climate adaptation work. It has to be led by this national adaptation plan, strategy, and document. So it's so important. Thank you so much. We finish with Yusuf Saad.
Yeah, my colleagues here cover all the points, but I understand when I took the sustainability course that we must share, or we must let the people who have the most effective in social media, like maybe religious people, maybe social media who have a lot of followers, that may be effective the people to awareness about national plans and national adaptation plans like that. That's the point I was talking about.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a point that was not raised, and it's a point that is very important. It's how to communicate also on it, and the communication part or the communication strategy also is often highlighted in those national adaptation plans. So that's a very good point. Okay, so moving forward, you said way more than what is included in this slide, but just to make some kind of small few sentences about it. So now we know that national adaptation plans are ways to integrate the risks that are being identified into national planning. And as some colleague mentioned, and budgeting processes and strategy. Budgeting processes is very important because, as I previously mentioned, it's the first challenges when it comes to climate adaptation projects. It's the lack of availability and access of resources. So putting it into some kind of budgeting strategy is very, very important. So the NAPs, again, they outline how the country will adapt in, as we mentioned, in this medium to long term. This is very important to have a medium to long term because many projects or strategies, it's better to have a long-term vision. As one of your colleagues also mentioned, it can be fine-tuned and it can be updated. Those national adaptation plans, it's not because they are drafted once that they will not change, but it's good to have those long-term vision. And if it changes based on climate data that we have or new data that we gather, we can change it. But it's very important to have this long-term vision. As also mentioned, it's really designed to fit challenges and risk from one country, because as it was said, Iraq is way different than Brazil, way different than Switzerland, right? So we have all our challenges. Some countries are more vulnerable than others, but we need to design it well to fit our challenges and risks. And again, this national adaptation plan is very, very important because it helps government to access climate finance. Once it's drafted, what are the risks? What is our strategy? It's way easier than to have international support and to identify and to mobilize finances, because it's way clearer on what we want to do and on either medium or long-term vision. Now I'm gonna show you 3 different examples of climate adaptation projects in the Arab region. Just for you to see a bit how climate adaptation projects can be put in place and with different scales and different thematic areas. So the first one is one that I'm working on actually, and it's in Egypt. So the project is called Enhancing Climate Change Adaptation in the North Coast and Nile Delta. It's a project funded mostly by GCF, which is the biggest environmental fund worldwide. It's called Green Climate Fund. It's a project over 7 years of roughly $30 million. The goal is to reduce coastal flooding risk in Egypt North Coast, because in the Mediterranean Sea, we see already that the sea level is rising, and we expect it to continue in the upcoming decades. And we also know that climate change induces more frequent and intense extreme storm events. So this further increases the risk of flooding. So the main thematic area here is coastal adaptation from the 10 thematic area I mentioned earlier. How do we plan to do this? It's by having 2 different actions, 2 different outputs. The first one is to construct 69 kilometers of sand dune dikes. This has been done. I've been visiting the place. I took this picture that you can see. So what is it? It is a project of nature-based solution. Again, this concept is very important. It is that we are seeing solutions for many of climate change impacts in the world in the nature and in ecosystems. And we know it works because we can see it. It was not human-made. We see that it works. So what we want to do is to mimic the nature to help us and to help the environment. So we saw in many different places that having sand dunes lower the risk of flooding because it stabilizes the land and it creates natural barriers, right, to flooding. So here we try to reconstruct it by putting some wooden fences over 69 kilometers. And then naturally, by having processes such as the wind blowing, erosion, then the sand gets trapped into those fences and it creates sand dunes. So here we can still see the fences, the dike system as we call, but in other places now it's fully covered. We can't see it anymore. And it creates this natural protection of flooding. The second output of this project is to create an integrated coastal zone management plan, ICZM as we call. This has many, many different activities within the output. One of it is to increase the capacity of different stakeholders, because there are so many stakeholders along the North Coast, either governmental, private sector, local organization. So it's how to increase their capacity in terms of withstand coastal flooding. Another point is to give more tools to the national observatory system to check weather condition and oceanographic condition to have more data on sea level rise, but also storm surges, storm events. And the third point, the third main point of this output number 2 is to create an early warning system for coastal flooding and internal flooding. So that is, once we will have the information through the National Observatory System of a storm coming, is how to display this information to people that may be subjected to flooding. How to display this information, who will be in charge of what, how to create collaboration, and how to coordinate within the different stakeholders of the North Coast for a better management. So as I said, this touches like the key area of coastal adaptation, but we can see that it also affects other key areas. For example, one key area that is affected by this project is the food security. In the Nile Delta, it's the place where in Egypt there is most of the agricultural activity. So by protecting the Nile Delta, we also protect food security. And the Nile Delta actually is a very, very vulnerable region because some land in the Nile Delta are below the sea level elevation, which means if there is some flooding that happen, then a lot of water will start flooding in the Nile Delta. So it's very important to protect and enhance the resilience of the coastline as we do with this project. Another key area that is impacted by this project is climate adaptation, climate information, and early warning system, because as we say, we are also through this project reinforcing climate information by having new tools, new systems, and also developing an early warning system. So all those projects, they have to be in some kind of integrated approach, because by affecting one area, it will also affect other areas. This is also shown in this other project, this other example of projects. This project is in Sudan. It's still running until this year. So it's called Building Resilience in the Face of Climate Change within Traditional Rain-Fed Agricultural and Pastoral System in Sudan. So what is pastoral system? Just briefly, is some kind of livelihood that depend a lot on livestock and with a strong notion of mobility. It's people that move kind of nomads also move with their livestock in order to find available resources such as water, food. But this, of course, this kind of livelihood is very impacted or vulnerable to climate change. Because as we know, since water resource and rainfall patterns, for example, are very affected, or droughts, it's very hard for them to adapt to climate change. So that's why we want to have some sort of shift to have more sustainable solutions for them. Yes, so it's also a GCF funding because, as I told you, it's the largest funding agency or donor in terms of environment. It's a project of 5 years that is roughly 40 million. So it will touch many different thematic areas. So livelihood, food system, water, resource management, and climate information and early warning system. It has 3 outputs. The first one is about the food production system. So this is this thematic area, as well as this one, is how to diversify your income in order to be more sustainable to climate change impact. So for example, it's by introducing salt or drought tolerant crops. Is how to choose different type of crops that would withstand better the drought or the salt. Another output is to improve the access of water for both human, livestock, and irrigation. So it's touching this thematic area, and it's rethinking the entire water resource management scheme by either digging boreholes, by creating irrigation systems, again, to better withstand the impact of climate change. The third one is to strengthen the capacities and knowledge of institutions and communities, again, to have more coordination, more collaboration, more understanding about what needs to be done in order to, again, better withstand the impact of climate change. The third, do I still have time? Yes, a bit of time. The third project I want to tell you about is one in Somalia. It's finished in 2022. It's called Enhancing Climate Resilience of the Vulnerable Communities and Ecosystems in Somalia, of roughly $73 million. So again, is how to create more capacity within vulnerable farmers. And in this project, there is a component that I particularly like is the ecosystem component. So again, it's a bit like the same thematic area as the previous project I told you about, but there is this one that is the ecosystem-based approach that is added. Through 2 outputs, again, enhancing policies, institutional framework, and government capacities through capacity building, through change in policies. And the second one is the piloting of ecosystem-based adaptation strategies. So that's very interesting to me because it's, again, those nature-based solutions that may be put in place, and it's how to enhance ecosystems for them to help us. I will put all the resources at the end of this presentation for you. If you want to have a look, feel free to go and browse it and to dig into this information. But it's basically depending on the context, because they implemented this project in different areas, and based on the context, they chose solutions that are also nature-based solutions, such as agroforestry. So it's planting trees to then help you with agriculture, or for example, sand dams, how to hold water to then be able to use this water either for drinking water needs or irrigation needs or for your livestock in a more natural strategy. I'm gonna finish with two last slides. One is, for me, the future of climate adaptation strategies. So we know that there are increasing impacts, worldwide increasing impacts based on the different contexts, different impacts, but they are increasing. We know that there is urgency to invest and implement adaptive strategy. Why? Because again, we saw that the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to implement, and it's going to be also more expensive. What I see also in the future is a focus on nature-based solutions, because as I said, it's, for me, very promising, because we are not inventing anything, we're just mimicking the nature that already proved itself in a way by showing its wonder and its solutions, and it's just implementing those solutions to help us and the nature to better withstand the impact of climate change. So in the future, we can see several scenarios. So we can either have the widespread implementation of those climate adaptation strategies, and or maybe a mix of both, to have a lot of limitation of this implementation because of resource scarcity and financial constraints. We know that climate change is within strategies of different nations, but there are also other topics for which a lot of finances are being allocated to. So let's see if we will be limited by those resources or not in the future. So to conclude, we can say that climate change is already having an impact on our ecosystems, economies, and communities worldwide, and that those adaptation strategies are essential to safeguard livelihoods and to reduce vulnerabilities. We also see in the, for example, the project I showed you, that it's better and it's more effective to have an integrated approach, because again, if we want to focus on one thematic area only, it's pretty much not possible, because it will eventually impact other thematic areas. So it's better to have an integrated approach to have a more effective solution. And last thing is that we need to have collaboration within institutions, within governments, but also between, and also with all the different stakeholders, because we need to have local solution, national solution, regional solutions, and we need to put together people that have money, people that are the needs, people that have the knowledge, in order to have a more effective solution. So those are all the additional resources I want to share with you. Hopefully the presentation will be shared with you so that you can access to it. So about the different projects I showed you, and also about the NAPs, and all the UNDP climate change adaptation projects in the Arab state. Maybe you will find some for your country. And feel free also to, if you're curious, to see if you can access the national adaptation plan of your country. And that's it. Do you have any questions? Yes, Abdallah.
Hi, Margaret, and hi, everyone. Thanks for the great session. I have a question. It's about the adaptation. The question is, how do we prioritize adaptation strategies in region with limited financial or technical?
Sorry, I can't hear you anymore. Can you maybe repeat your
Yeah.
question?
Did you hear me well, Margaret?
Yes, I can hear you now. I was not hearing you for a while.
Hello?
Abdallah, we can hear you now. Can you repeat your question? Thank you. Yes, Abdallah? Osman? Okay, so maybe I jump to Mohammed Nath's question and then come back to you once you fixed. Okay, maybe Mohammed, can you ask your question? And I will come back to you, Abdallah.
Okay, first of all, thank you for this session. It was perfect, actually, and your discussion was very perfect. My question is very simple. The word mitigation, I can't get this meaning as well. You know, my English is it not the best, but I do my best. Okay.
Yeah, actually, mitigation is a very complicated word, but it's good to understand its meaning because we often, as I said, say, what do you do? What actions do you do for climate change? And people always reply either, oh, I work on mitigation or I work on adaptation. So that's why I wanted to make extra clear. I'm sorry if it was not clear, but I'm gonna try to repeat it again in a clear way, hopefully. So mitigation is really trying to focus on the reduction only of greenhouse gases that are the cause of climate change and their impact and their effects and everything. So it's really how to reduce those emissions by either, for example, we know that, for example, some industrial processes make a lot of pollution, are very pollutants because they emit a lot of greenhouse gases. So it's, for example, think differently of the design or the process of those industrial processes in order to limit the amount of pollution that will then go in the air and contribute to climate change. So it's really targeting only the greenhouse gases emission. As I said, you can do it in two different ways. Either, as I mentioned, by targeting where the source of emission is, for example, and industries. So it's where it comes from. It's from this industry that the emission comes from. So how do I concretely change processes in this industry to have less emission of greenhouse gases? That's one way. And the second way is by creating sink. So it means it's when you have already greenhouse gases that is in the air, how to remove it. For example, by planting trees. We know that trees are sink of CO2, of carbon dioxide, because they do need carbon dioxide to grow, and they breathe it, and then they reject oxygen. So for example, by planting tree, you just take out of the atmosphere some of those greenhouse gases. So that's one of the two ways of reducing greenhouse gases. So it has nothing to do with like the project I told you about of like how to limit the impact. It's really sorry. It's really only on the emissions of greenhouse gases. Is it clear?
Someone's mic is open.
Yes, I know. I don't know.
Yes.
Please mute your
Atribi,
mic,
can you
please.
close the mic of him, please? Atribi, can you do that, please?
Thank you, Margaret. This is very clear now. You do it with the best way. Thank you.
Okay.
And you mentioned the one of the important thing I study now in this week. Okay, the word of sustainability. You know, to remove any pollution or industrial pollution with sustainable way.
Yes.
Like
Oh, I can't see you anymore. But yeah, sustainability is also one of those words that we use a bit all the time, but it's very important. And sustainability can touch many also different areas. Economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability. Yeah, it's very important. Thank you so much. Maybe we can move on to Khadir.
Yes. Hey again.
Hi.
So my question is, the first question, is NAPS related to the key areas that you have mentioned before at the beginning of the session? Are they related? I mean, the 10 key areas that you have mentioned, that about adoption, policy and planning, livelihoods, ecosystem-based, they are related.
In most of the
Am I
cases,
right?
yeah, they are definitely related. Again, it's really context-based, but as I showed you in some projects, it's definitely related because, for example, the
Yeah,
one,
they are related.
yes, I mean, yes, because when acting on people, you act on nature, you act on many different topics.
Yes.
Yeah, even if you want to target one, for example, the Egypt one, when you want to target really coastal adaptation, you think it's only coastal adaptation because everything is on the coasts. It really looks straightforward. But again, even if you want to target one, it will have some, likely it will have some impact on other key areas. So they're all intercorrelated to a certain extent, I would say.
Okay, so how can NAPS like promote food security in a healthy and sustainable way? You know, like ensuring that efforts to prevent hunger and starvation do not lead to long-term health problems from unhealthy or processed food. Because when they keep eating some, like NGOs nowadays, they are only caring for providing food to prevent starvation only, but they're not thinking about, is that a fuel or just like the food must be a fuel? It's not only a fuel, that's what I mean. It's like a medicine. They're not thinking about that. They're just providing them with sugar, vegetable oils that they are refined sugar and flour, but they're not thinking about like what you have mentioned at the key area and the NAPS. They're not linked. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I think you're really touching something that two things. One is really the integrated approach, and the second one is, I don't know if you know this concept. It's called Wi-Fi nexus. So it's WEFE nexus. So it's water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus. So nowadays, it's really something, it's still new, kind of. Not many people are thinking that way, but it's a new concept that is growing in thinking that when you want to implement something about food, for example, it will have an effect on the other elements of this nexus. So water, energy, food, and ecosystem. So it's really important what you're saying, and I think the answer is really to be aware that all of those are interconnected, and especially the water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus. Because as you say, even though you're trying to fix only something, you will have impact, and mostly and often negative impact on the others. So you have to have some kind of integrated system or design, or at least know that it will have impacts on the other, and try to minimize those impacts, or just try to have a sustainable design again, for bringing the word sustainability. But that's so important. I'm gonna put it in the chat maybe afterwards, this approach, this nexus approach, that is so interesting. You have a lot of literature online too about it if you're interested. So interesting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Maybe Rabish?
Hello.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Sayyid Sami, can you mute yourself, please?
أيوة.
There is a
Hello.
mic which is on mute.
Actually, I'm sorry because we tried to mute them, but we tried to mute them many times. We cannot doing that. Said, can you just close your mic?
Sayed, Sami, can you just mute yourself? Okay, Margaret, thank you so much for this wonderful session. I have two questions. The first one is regarding finance and sustainability, and the second one is about coordination. I will start talking about the first one. And you talked once you talked about finance, you highlighted that there is sometimes a limitation of finance that could occur. So my question here, sometimes I would like to make sure that the projects I'm making are sustainable. So what are some effective strategies for mobilizing long-term financing, for example, to support the implementation of the national adaptation plans? And the second question is about the coordination. Since we know the coordination must be done on different levels, so how can, for example, government improve coordination among different sectors and levels of administration when developing and implementing the national adaptation plans?
Okay. So the first question, tell me if I understood correctly, is how to effectively access finance in order for a national adaptation plan to be implemented, right?
Yes, exactly. So we can like make sure that they are for they can stay for the long term.
Yeah. So I think there are many answers to this question, but maybe just what comes into my mind is that we need to have something very important, is that we need to have some kind of preliminary risk assessment. We need to have some preliminary assessment to know where are the risks, where are the vulnerability, in order then to quantify them and to be able to target them. Because if we don't know where to start, it's very hard, because we have to be very, when trying to mobilize resources, we need to have concrete plans. And funding agencies, they need to know that you know what you're doing, or that you have enough evidence that this is a need. So I guess for me, the most effective way to have access to finance is to have some sort of strong climate information and risk assessment to then be able to draft, for example, project proposals and everything. So that's very important. And it's also very important within the national adaptation plan to have strategies and to have objectives. Because as mentioned, a lot of nations, a lot of countries now are drafting those national adaptation plans. And some are ambitious, some are not ambitious, some are clearly writing objectives, some are not really. But I think for me, it's very important to have objectives, because once you have objective, you can also come with proposition in order to reach those objectives. So it's easier also kind of to have something to come with, for example, again, for drafting a project document or a project, when you try to access some money, is to have, you know, where the risks are, you know what are the needs are, because you have the climate information, and you want to reach a certain objective because it's written, for example, in your national adaptation plan. So those are two very important, I would say, points in order to better or more easily access resources, financial resources. In terms of coordination, how, let me repeat again, so that I'm sure that I'm answering your question. How can government think of ways to have more coordination between stakeholders? Is that your question?
Yes, exactly. So we can make sure that all stakeholders from different levels are engaged into developing and implementing national adaptation plans.
Wow, that's a very difficult question, I would say. But I think one key element is to have some kind of advocacy to bring knowledge that it's going to be more efficient and more impactful to have many stakeholders involved at different levels. Because again, government or government officials or different ministries without government sometimes might not think that it is important, or it might not be their priority, right? But if you advocate for the fact that if you bring, for example, local knowledge of things that are already present, already working within the communities, and just try to help it or to scale it up, it will be way more efficient than trying to draft or design some plans at a higher level, at a governmental level, and then try to implement it. So I think it's really important for them to understand that it will also help them to have some kind of very coordination at all levels. But it's very difficult.
Yeah, thank you so much, Margaret. Actually, I gave this question as I sensed this in my country here in Yemen. There is some strong, resistance from governments towards organizations, whether they are internationals or national ones. Especially once an organization is proposing a project to the government is resisting it, and and they try to fight back it as they don't actually know, or maybe they're not aware of how important this project is, or maybe they are not engaged from the earliest, let's say, project design, so that they become unaware of it later on, and they say, we don't want this to happen, or we don't want this project to be implemented. But what you really said is really important, is making an advocacy before implementing a project. And this is, I believe, it's the solution, especially here in Yemen. We need to include authorities from the earliest project design stage, so they can know exactly what are we doing. Thank you so much. I really loved the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. For example, if I want to share with you something that we're doing here in Egypt is I'm helping organizing right now what we call social dialogues on climate change. And it's that we are going in different governorates and we are raising some specific, again, areas related to climate change, for example, gender, coastal zones, food systems and everything. And we want to raise local knowledge. We want to ask them question about how do they actually do they feel the impact first, and how do they deal with it? And we want really to have this local voice being raised. And we're gonna draft, I'm supposed to draft soon, compile a report with all those dialogues and events that are taking place in all the governorates, to then transfer it to the Ministry of Environment, actually, for them to implement those priorities that were, or the needs that are raised in the future National Adaptation Plan of Egypt that is being drafted right now. So hopefully this will work. But that's, for example, an idea of how you can try to have more coordination or more impact at the local level in more like national strategies. But thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You're welcome.
Sheima Omar, you have a question? Yes, Sheima Omar. Hi.
First, thanks for this amazing session.
Can you speak a bit louder? I'm sorry. I can't hear you. I can feel that you're saying something, but I can't hear it clearly.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Hi. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Maybe can you, say your question and I will see if I hear correctly, or maybe you can write it in the chat and I answer it from the chat. Let's try. Can you tell your question?
Okay, can you hear me?
A bit. I'll try.
First, thanks for this amazing session.
عرفت الجاي منو؟ نروح لها.
Alham Faisal, can you maybe mute yourself? Alham Faisal, can you maybe mute yourself? Sorry, I couldn't follow up with the chat, but I will read everything afterwards. Thank you so much for all your help. Maybe I move to Ali Makli question and Sheima Omar, if you can write down your question in the chat and I'll try to answer it. Thank you so much. So Ali Makli, can you unmute yourself and ask your question if you have one?
Hi, Margot. It's actually Makhali.
Oh, sorry.
No worry. Actually, my question is very related for my colleagues, Ravish. But it's like in field levels. How can adaptation plans be better aligned with the local governance structure to ensure that community are not just beneficiaries, but active partner in implementation? We have here in my communities the most climate adaptation activity on the field or projects. It's about animal support, agriculture support, wastewater treatment, planet rehabilitation, and irrigation network rehabilitation. So after we finish all the activities on the field level, how can we let's say sustain the intervention?
Wow, that's a question I've been asking myself also while working in this field because of course we know when we may all have heard of stories of people that are trying to come and implement what they think is the solution and then just leave and the solution is not really taken or the ownership is not taken by the local people. So that's one of the major problems. So that's very important. And I think if we knew the answer, it would be easier. But maybe I can tell you a bit about what I feel is a way that is a bit more, bit better. The first one is really about the identification of the projects. So just to choose at first which projects are gonna take place. I think that's important to have some kind of local participation in this because again, we don't want them to be only beneficiaries, but we don't want them to be implementers and then to continue with the solution. So we want them to truly accept it or be curious about it because they might not know about the solution. So the idea is really to bring up ideas and to have some kind of participatory sessions to explain, for example, what will be implemented. I think that's something important. So that's even before the implementation. That's just at some kind of consultation for them to know that they are heard because it's very important. And once this is done and you identify with them which solution you can implement, it's good to have, for example, grants at first. So it means to bring solution for free to them because they need to try it out. Of course, like they will not be necessarily totally convinced about the solution, and we need to try out the solution in the context because the solution might work in another context but might not work in their context. So it's to bring the solution, but then to put in place some kind of system, financial system also, for them to access, to have an easier access for them to the solution. Because at some point they will have to, if we want the solution to scale up, they will have to pay for it or they will have to buy it, for example. So for example, to really think about a financial design, a financial solution of, for example, having easier access to loans, or having loans with like that are more appealing for them, that are with good conditions for them. I think that's something that is very important, because if you just leave afterwards and they have to pay for themselves the solution or the technology or whatever, it's very hard. So you really have to have a component of the project that is about how financially sustainable this can be on the long term. I think this is not very much done like in projects. In projects, it's mainly just the implementation and that's it. But again, by having a strong preparatory phase and having also money allocated to think about the future, that makes, I think, the project more successful. But again, there might be other solutions.
Thanks a lot, Margot. More than I asked.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think, yeah, I took 20 more minutes out of your time, but I was really impressed by all of you and how you were answering to my questions and the questions that you raised. I'm super surprised and I'm super impressed by it. So thank you so much for having me. It was also super interesting for me. So thank you all for attending, and you have my contact here, so don't hesitate to add me on LinkedIn or to send me any questions that you may have via emails. I would be more than happy to continue this this conversation with you guys, and you're so talented, so thank you so much for all your questions.
Okay, thank you, Margaret, to be with us today. I'm so happy to include my knowledge by you. What did you deliver today? And actually, I'm impressed by the all of the questions.
Yeah.
Yes, all of them are expert in their countries, and I'm so happy to have a question from Tunisia to Yemen to Iraq, then for Egypt, then return back to GCC regions, then return back to the North Africa. All of them, I'm so proud for that. And to be honest with all of you, I don't believe when I created this project that we have in our region this type of minds. And for that reason, we will complete our fellowship for the fourth lecture in the same module. It will be as the 9th of October. We will be with one of the Tunisian negotiator, and she's had a PhD and master degree from UK in the field of climate action. So I hope all of you to attend on the time. And at the end of our, we have actually another people say, can you write down the approach that you have mentioned? I think we have the people here sent some questions in the chat box.
Oh, really?
Something called Nexus.
Yes, the Wi-Fi Nexus.
Yeah, and for the content and for the LinkedIn profile of Margaret, we will send all of these details through the email for all of you. Once we get approval from all of our speaker, we will send it module by module, not by the lecture. So it is a time maybe for a meeting photos. So can everyone open here the video, please, or open the camera? I will open my window. Yeah, Ali. Hello, hello, Rafish.
I'm always exciting for the photo.
Yeah, it is a memorial thing that we did every lecture.
That's great.
Ghadir, Inas, hi, Selma. Yes. Okay. The other people are still shy to open their okay. Okay, thank you all of you. Thank you, Yusuf. It's my pleasure to meet all of you today, and we will meet again at 9th of October. Thank you, Margaret, again. And for sure, I will share the feedback of all of them to you through the email, through my colleague Hanin. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye bye for all. Thank you.
Bye bye. يعطيك من العافية.